Welcome to Wild, Women in Lending Determined to Make an Impact. I'm your host, Robyn LaVassaur. They say our biggest fear isn't being inadequate. It's being powerful beyond measure. In this podcast, I will share how to break through imaginary ceilings, lean into success, discovering your purpose, and understanding how to create the business and life of your dreams. From failures to triumphs and all the tactics in between, let's jump into the wild arena together. Welcome back to Wild with Robyn LaVassaur. If I was probably even my 22-year-old daughters right now, they use the word cringe. And Brené Brown often references leaning in and staying in what we would call a cringy moment. I don't love that word. I like to be a little more traditional with, hey, what makes you uncomfortable? And we all talk about, hey, you got to lean into discomfort and that'll get you growth, right? I don't like going to the gym. You go to the gym, you see results. You might not love the actual workout, but you love what's on the other side, right? You've got to get uncomfortable to grow. I'm going to give you a skill that absolutely changed my life, and it actually held me back in lending and the job that I do. And what I didn't realize it actually held me back in life more than I knew, more than I probably cared to admit or face. And so let's talk about the word itself, and that is confrontation. Most people, when you say, are you in love with confrontation? I will tell you, in a room full of income earners, the more uncomfortable you are with confrontation, I would directly correlate that potentially to your income as well. What's crazy about that is that I didn't understand that, and nobody had ever said that to me until the owner of our company, who has coached and mentored me for so long. He said to me, hey, you will never break the barrier to the next income level without falling in love with confrontation. He believed it so much and knew that I needed to change my own relationship with being likable, liked by everybody, and avoiding confrontation, that he had me write down, I love confrontation 10 times a day on a piece of paper every single day until I was so reprogrammed in my mind that I actually did love it. Now, here's what's crazy about that. How we view confrontation is a big thing, right? And I think that things are caught, not taught, as in my podcast idol, if you will, Ed Milet would say. That caught, not taught is so incredibly powerful, because what we have learned in the past is how people often deal and react with confrontation. Interesting, because if you start to think about the people you surround yourself with and you think, how do they handle criticism, feedback, what we would like to call a pineapple, right? It's hard and maybe not super warm and fuzzy on the outside, but on the inside, it comes with nothing but goodness, right? It's coming from a good place. Well, I knew that even if I was coming from the best place, if it was going to make somebody feel sad, bad, apologize, maybe get angry, provoke a reaction that I was not ready to tackle, I avoided confrontation. And here's what's interesting is we avoid confrontation with the very person that we want to have it with, but then we often talk about it. I'm super guilty of this. And I think if we're being honest, most of us are at one point or another in our lives. We talk about that confrontation with multiple other people about the person that we should be confronting. Not only that, but we carry it around with us. And have you ever realized that if you carry around a bunch of things that you should have confronted somebody with, and I'm going to get this into business here in a second, but think about this for a minute, and they drive you crazy, and you either need to put it to bed and not let it drive you crazy anymore, or confront it. If you are carrying around tons of that and you're not confronting people, you're not living clean. And living clean means, hey, how clean are you on the inside? And I'm not saying that we need to have, just blurt out rude things to people, if you will. I don't think that's what confrontation is. But I do believe there are skills around confrontation. And I'm actually going to take it into what would be a realtor or a client meeting, in saying things that you're thinking in your head, but you're unwilling to say. That is confrontation in itself. You need to confront somebody with something that needs to be said that you're saying on the inside, on repeat, potentially. It's bothering you, but you're not willing to say it out loud. I will tell you, I didn't realize how much deciding that confrontation was actually just an incredible way to communicate, to problem solve, and to ultimately rectify whatever situation was happening, and to gain clarity from somebody, and ultimately to live free. Once I learned that and I realized it and now I practice it, what a difference. And yes, shockingly, my income not only doubled, it more than doubled, and my overall life got better because I was willing just to pause and say something. So let's talk about the skills around confrontation and what we need to do in order to live a cleaner life in this space. So first of all, if you hate it, if you're uncomfortable with it, if you avoid it more often than not, if you're feeling unresolved about a lot of things that are valid. Now, there are some things that aren't valid. We all know it, right? I'll give you a really weird one, and don't make fun of me for this. Like, I rub my feet together. My dad rubbed his feet together. I rub my feet together out of habit. It drives my husband crazy. I don't need him to tell me every single day of his life that it drives him crazy, because here's a little secret, I'm not stopping. It's clearly not something that is divorceable to my husband and I, but I rub my feet together. It drives him crazy. He let it be known once. We've resolved and it's not moving forward. We're not talking about it anymore, right? Like, there's different things that might drive you crazy about somebody that you don't confront because it's really not that big of a deal. So you've been able to just go, I'm going to take a deep breath and not worry about that, right? Like, maybe how somebody laughs. Maybe it drives you nuts, how they sneeze, whatever is going, how they eat food drives you nuts. Are you really going to say something? Do they really need to fix it for you? Or do we just need to get over it? That's different. Confrontation is much more a, hey, team member, you're not doing your job well, maybe at all. You're making my job harder. I'm mad about it. I've told about 20 people how frustrated I am. I'm to the point where I no longer like my job or am enjoying where I work, but I won't tell you, but I keep putting more and more distance between us. That's avoiding confrontation. No different than, hey, I've got some really big things that I need to confront somebody on. Hey, I know this is happening. I'm asking about it. It might be confronting your kids with something that you didn't want to know. Hey, I know that you've lied to me about a couple things. Those kind of confrontations absolutely need to happen. And I am stunned at how many people avoid them as to not be in that quote unquote cringy situation. So let's talk about it when it comes to business for a minute. Confrontation. I will tell you, all borrowers at all times, all clients, a third will shop you. And I think in this day and age, if you will, there is so much out there about interest rates in general that when it relates to actual mortgage rates, but you could also say, hey, I'm an insurance salesman, I'm a financial advisor, I'm whatever I do, if I'm selling something, if you will, and there's a price to it, a third of your clients will shop you. We don't often want to confront the shopping, but then later we have all of this emotion on, I gave you this, I did this for you, I did that for you, but really they showed you signs that they were shopping, but you didn't want to confront it. Therefore, you feel even worse when they potentially leave you. How do you handle it? How do we tackle it? Let's talk about it for a minute. One is, and I've done this before, talking about it on a podcast, the most important thing. Having a client, people will show you and tell you who they are if you're willing to pay attention and to ask more questions and to dig deeper and to push up against it, confront it, if you will. But we often want to write our own narrative that has more of a storybook ending, right? We often want the all things to be happy and what our imagination is creating to become the reality. And the truth is, if we were just willing to stop right there and confront what they just said, it would actually allow us then to make a more sound decision with what we want to invest, right? Hey, I'm really, really clear about where we both stand and how we would potentially move forward. So with clients, and this is no joke, for years, I spent time hoping everybody would choose me and very much assume closing, assuming they would choose me, right? I'm going to assume that you're my client. And I would give them everything. My cell phone number, I practically worked all hours of the day. If they called or texted or emailed, I was always getting back to them, trying to make sure that they were taken care of at the highest level. Oh, and then all of a sudden they would be shopping me, and I've put in all this work, all these pre-approval letters, spent Saturdays, done, walked away from the dinner table, left the birthday party for a minute, spent time again. And the truth is, deep down inside, I knew the rates, if you will, or monthly payment or fees were the most important thing to them, but I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to confront it because that would be uncomfortable. And once I knew, what do I do with it? Have you ever known something kind of deep down inside, but hoped it to not be true? And so you don't want to say it out loud as to not give it more power, right? You're just going to, I'm going to avoid this. I'm going to hope over here that that's not happening. I can't tell you how many people actually allow their joy in the business to be stolen because they're not willing to have this confrontation up front. And it's really clarity. Confrontation is clarity. And so, hey, let's talk about what's most important to you. Is it the house? Is it the rate? Is it the payment? Is it the cash to close? Now, many borrowers would say, oh, it's all of those things. That means we're not deep enough yet, right? Like, let's dig deeper. House, payment, rate, cash to close, total cash out of pocket. Let's talk about it. Let's butt up against it. Let's look at what they qualify for. Let's dig. And if they, at the end of that one meeting that you're having, say at the end of the day, the only thing that matters to me, thank you for your time. You've been awesome, Robyn. We'd love to work with you, but it's really going to come down to interest rate. Period. End of story. Here's what we don't want to confront in that moment. We often want to, okay, well, call me when you need a pre-approval letter. Call me when you're out looking at houses. Let me know. And then we spend all this extra time still thinking that we're going to change what they already told us was their values. Now, if you're not the absolute cheapest lender, and I can tell you, the odds are you're not, because there's always somebody who's going to come in and do it for a little bit cheaper in the mortgage world, if you will, then for sure, you have to be willing to confront right then and there. And so with clients, what I would literally say, and this might freak you out a little bit, but I can't tell you how freeing it was for my business in general to be able to say to a client, hey, we got this all in order. I've pushed back on, is the house important? Is that pre-approval letter and who is on it? If you're in a competing offer situation, do you care if you lose the house over who you're pre-approved with? Do you care if your cash to close is higher because of the rate that you've engaged with, right? Does that matter? Do you care if you're not going to keep the house long term, but you need this strategic and the rescore for your credit? You need all of these other things that I'm going to be able to give you to get you the very best overall situation. Does any of it matter to you? If none of it matters, that's okay. That doesn't mean, it's like saying that every single guy I ever dated should have wanted to marry me. They all should have wanted to. Now, how silly does that sound? Well, it's no different in the world of clients, if you will, and service providers. Not everyone is ever going to be your client, whether it's because of you can't actually help them with the needs that they have. Maybe it's that you can't actually meet their expectation of cost. Maybe it's just not a good overall fit. Maybe you don't even speak the same language and you can't help them because of that. Maybe you're not authorized, licensed to do business where they ultimately end up needing to do business. Maybe you know that it's not your expertise with what they're actually looking for. There are a million reasons, and one of them is price. And so if you actually have this conversation with a client and you say, you know what, we are competitive, but we are not cheap. Now, I will tell you, cheap means no brick and mortar, an online lender, and ultimately that varies from day to day with every online lender. And you might be dealing with a basic clerk who has their licensing that just happens to be working in a phone center. And you're going to send everything over to them and they're going to push it through the system. And I would give you a 60% chance that you're probably decently happy with the outcome with that. Now, you might put a house at risk. You might go through some empty promises or some poor communication. You might have a listing agent and a seller that are more high stress as a result of it. You might end up with a bad appraisal due to a national appraisal panel because it's literally just pushing buttons. But if that is ultimately comes with the price that is the number one thing to you in this entire transaction, then I'd like to do you a favor. Knowing that, I'd actually like to serve you right now at the highest level, and that's to put your information into bankrate.com. And there will be no less than probably 20 to 30 lenders fighting it out. And what I will tell you is when you get into contract and you've called those lenders for pre-approval letters, one of them on that day will lock you in at the cheapest of the cheap of the cheap. And if that's still not cheapest and you hear that rates go down, you can still continue to shop from there and make some changes as long as you can meet your closing date with your seller. And there are companies that will play that game with you. I'm personally not one of them. We offer a service and an experience and ultimately are looking for a value-driven relationship with you, with the agent, with the seller, with the listing agent, everybody involved in the transaction. And we are a brick and mortar local competitive, not cheap, but ultimately professional organization. Every single time I've said that to somebody, I will tell you that there are some that ultimately, yep, it's rate and only rate, and they are walking out the door. And guess what? I didn't spend my Saturday talking to them. I didn't issue 5 more pre-approval letters. I didn't give advisement. And what I love to do is then call them a couple weeks later and have a conversation of how are things going. I'm still going to check in on you. There's no ill will here whatsoever. And some of those people have become my very, very best referral sources because they experience the ick, which is doing a home loan pretty much with anybody, literally elsewhere, which means I still remain pristine in their mind. And they ultimately like my follow-up, like my service, didn't ultimately choose my price. That's okay. They went down the road and did that, but they're willing to still say my name in such a high regard that I didn't lose a relationship with the realtor. I didn't ultimately lose with the client. In fact, I won because they experienced maybe a rough patch over here, and I bought back my time to go invest in more leads and more relationships. How do we get there? Well, I will tell you, it's incredibly hard to do if you don't have enough money in the bank. It's incredibly hard to do if you are not generating leads yourself. And so those two things kind of solve everything. If you've got a few months of reserves in the bank and you yourself are generating leads and trust yourself to go get another one. The moment I freed my time up from somebody who I've confronted and it's not ultimately my client, I'm able to go gain a new client, check in on a current client, edify and deepen a relationship with a referral partner. As long as I spend that time wisely instead of complaining, frustrated, moaning, licking my wounds, having the pity party in the corner, the woe is me, the everyone is shopping me, catastrophizing, interest rates and all of these things, man, I will tell you, just confronting it head on, deciding, no, you're not my client. It's not even them not choosing me. It's me saying, you're actually not my client and I'm aware of that. Therefore, I'm going to draw a line right here. You can do this in real estate relationships in terms of referral partners. You can do this in terms of team members, companies that you work for and with, friendships, coworkers. I mean, there are a million different places that you can choose to say, hey, here's what I'm willing to do, what I have to offer, and I'm okay if that doesn't fit. I'm also okay if you don't fit or align with me. Somebody out there does. I know that for a fact because I've been married for 25 plus years very happily, and imagine if I expected every single boy to want to marry me versus the one that, hey, you know what? There was alignment there. There was synergy there. And we have lots of healthy confrontation in our relationship. My team, I constantly had issues, if you will, with team members as I was building a team, as I became a leader. And what I learned was how sad to be frustrated, but not give them the benefit of knowing that they're not meeting your expectations versus just saying it, confronting it, and being clear. And then, hey, we get to move on. And now they know, hey, she's told me that's not how she wants that done, or that's not how we're going to handle that situation going forward. It's now my choice to make changes or not, and know that there would be a consequence by just deductive reasoning because I've been told how it needs to be done and I'm choosing not to do it. There's so much freedom in living clean, and confrontation is a beautiful way to problem solve, to ultimately have a clean conscience, but also just a clear mind, right? A clear heart. And if everything that you're doing is with the intention of truly meeting somebody's needs, truly knowing if you are the one to be able to serve them, to solve the problem, to be the partner to them that they need you to be in whatever situation it is, you will ultimately have more joy in your life, more joy in your business, and more freedoms than I can even put into a dollar sign, time, or just happiness in general. So fall in love with confrontation. Write it down every single day. Do the work not only within yourself, but with other people. Get better at the skill and grow from there. If this was helpful, I hope you share it, and we will see you on the next episode of Wild.